An article titled "Putin Will Undoubtedly Win the Iran War" has appeared. In summary, the article argues that, in the current Iran war, the U.S. has launched numerous Tomahawk missiles to destroy missile launchers and factories. The more Tomahawks the U.S. uses, the less likely they are to be supplied to Ukraine. Furthermore, the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and other factors are likely to cause oil prices to skyrocket. This would be a blessing in disguise for Russia, whose economy is strained after spending enormous sums on the 4-year war. In addition, the view that the U.S. will expedite a ceasefire in Ukraine after the Iran war works to Russia's advantage, and the pressure to encourage Putin to make concessions that he feels are unavoidable for lasting peace will disappear. Ultimately, it can be said that Putin will be the final winner. That's what the article says. In conclusion, the idea that Putin will be the winner is extremely strange, isn't it? First, regarding the supply of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. The U.S. briefly indicated the possibility, but ultimately withdrew the offer. Ukraine continues to lobby the U.S. for Tomahawks but no longer expects it. The U.K. has also supplied Storm Shadow missiles, which are being used effectively. While they certainly have limitations in terms of range and other aspects, Ukraine has developed its own missiles such as Flamingo and drones, which have been playing a significant role recently. Ukraine intends to fight the war with these forces. While Tomahawks are certainly powerful, the possibility of them being supplied was low from the start, so they are irrelevant to the Iran war. On the other hand, it is certainly true that the surge in crude oil prices will be a blessing for the Russian economy. Let's look at the price trend of WTI crude oil. The graph shows the daily closing price. This graph shows the daily candlestick chart. On March 9th, the price rose to around $115. Prices initially fell following Trump's statement that the war was nearing its end. However, with the Strait of Hormuz effectively blocked, prices have since been on an upward trend. On March 11th, IEA member states announced a record-breaking coordinated release of 400 million barrels of oil reserves, but crude oil prices did not fall. Rather, they rose afterward. On the 13th, WTI crude oil closed at $99. Let's look at past periods of high crude oil prices. The graph shows a slightly longer-term WTI price trend. It displays data from October 2021. Looking at the past, immediately after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, prices approached $120. Current prices haven't risen that high, but depending on future developments, the possibility of approaching that price cannot be ruled out. Iran has warned of a $200 price surge, but what will happen? The U.S.'s statements regarding the recent attack on Iran have also been constantly changing. Just when we thought we'd seen articles urging China not to buy Russian and Iranian crude oil, there are now reports that other countries will be allowed to purchase Russian crude oil for 30 days. The stated reason is to ensure a stable energy supply. Prior to this, on the 5th, the U.S. Treasury Department allowed India to purchase Russian crude oil for 30 days. This is certainly a blessing in disguise for Russia. If the war between Iran and the U.S. drags on, crude oil prices will remain high, providing a boost to Russia's war finances. However, the Russian economy, which has been at war for 4 years, is in a serious slump. Russia's GDP growth rate for 2025 is projected to be only 1%. After 2 consecutive years of high growth exceeding 4%, it has stalled. The current Russian economy is in a very difficult state, and even if crude oil prices rise somewhat, it will be almost impossible to improve the economy as long as the war continues. Furthermore, at the G7 meeting, it was decided that sanctions against Russia would continue. While the U.S.'s actions were a concern, this can be considered a reasonable decision. As mentioned earlier, there was a move to allow the purchase of Russian crude oil for 30 days. Treasury Secretary Bessent stated that this would not bring significant benefits to the Russian government. While it may bring some benefits, its impact on the overall Russian economy is likely to be limited. Returning to the Bloomberg article, the article accurately describes the recent decline in Russia's combat capability. Russia's ability to expand occupied territory has drastically decreased. By 2025, the amount of occupied territory expanded will be minimal. In fact, recently, losses of occupied territory have even been observed. In contrast, the number of Russian military casualties has been enormous. This is because Russia is repeatedly launching reckless attacks, while Ukraine is conducting effective counterattacks. According to Reuters, since the start of the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Russian forces have occupied approximately 20% of Ukraine. But since the beginning of 2023, Russia has only gained control of 1.3% of Ukrainian territory. At the Munich Security Conference in February, NATO Secretary General Ruda stated that approximately 65,000 Russian soldiers had been killed or wounded in the past 2 months, and that Russia was suffering incredible losses in Ukraine. According to estimates released in January by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, Russian troops are suffering an average of more than 26,000 casualties per month, including dead, wounded, and missing, and a cumulative total of 1.2 million casualties since 2022. While Russia denies these figures, they are considered to be highly accurate as approximate figures. Such military losses incurred by Russia in waging war are also a major blow to its economy. The military budget is enormous, covering weapons and equipment, soldier salaries, pensions for the dead and wounded, and contract bonuses for new recruits. Recently, Russia's military spending accounts for 7% of its GDP. Furthermore, the large number of young people deployed to the battlefield, resulting in numerous casualties, exacerbates labor shortages in domestic industries. To address this shortage, Russia is utilizing immigrants. In recent years, there have been problems with cases of immigrants being recruited from Africa using fraudulent methods and forced to work in slave-like conditions. It appears that a significant number of assault troops on the battlefield are also foreigners who have been deceived and brought in. This is the situation in Russia. Even if rising oil prices increase national revenue and provide some assistance in financing the war effort, there is little room to revive the domestic economy, which is on the verge of collapse. As mentioned in the Bloomberg article, Iran was one of Russia's few supporters. If Iran falls under U.S. influence, Russia's long-term strategic losses will be enormous. Furthermore, Putin failed to protect not only Iran's Khamenei, but also former Syrian President Assad and Venezuelan President Maduro. Russia no longer possesses the power of a great power, which it is trying to regain through the invasion of Ukraine. This is merely a delaying tactic. Russia will only slowly collapse. In this situation, it would be inappropriate to call Putin a winner. Poor Putin.